Hello and welcome back to Shifting Gears. Today we are putting front and rear struts on a 2005 Hyundai Tucson. Good thing about it is the way that the customer has chosen to do it is what's called a complete strut assembly. As you can see here on the ground, they are the struts, come with the springs, your strut mounts, everything. Now, one thing about this is a repair that most of the cars out on the road actually need, but nobody ever does because of the expense involved. Where these are complete struts, the expense really isn't all that much. However, if you were to buy the struts themselves separate, and then the coil springs in the strut plates and or mounts, or the rubber boots and all isolators and stuff that go on them, you'll end up spending a lot more than what you do for the complete strut anyway. And the good thing about the replacement struts is they make you ride a lot better, they make it handle a lot better, and what a lot of people don't understand is they decrease your stopping distance. And they do that because every time you hit your brakes, your vehicle doesn't nosedive, therefore kind of throwing its weight forward. So they definitely help with braking issues and stuff also. But as you're getting ready to see, it really isn't that hard to do. So let's get this thing in the air and get some tires off of it. Okay, we're going to get started on the front. And one thing I want to point out is a good way for you to know that you do indeed need struts is if you look right here, you got a real greasy film. That's where all the oil has escaped out of the strut and started leaking down. You notice it doesn't come from above, everything above it's dry. It's coming from that seal right there. So that right there is a good sign that you need a strut. But now, let's go ahead and get this thing started. First thing we're going to do is pull off the sway bar links, which this particular one has already had them replaced. So it's got a place where you can put a wrench on the back side. Because what these are, it's like a ball that goes inside a housing. And a lot of times when you try to loosen that outside nut, that ball will just spin on you. And the whole assembly will spin, you'll never get the nut off. So in cases where you don't have some place to put a wrench on there, the best thing you can do is get a pair of vice grips, slide them in there up against the actual bracket on the stud, and clamp them down. Then you can hold the vice grips while you're spinning that nut out. That. We get that out of the way, maybe. There we go. Then on this front side of it here, you have a 10mm bolt that holds the ABS line on. You need to remove that. Just kind of move your ABS out of the way. And then on the back side, you have a second one. In the meantime, you can just leave that dangling. Now, we need to get the clip off the brakes there. If you look right there, there's a little clip that keeps the brake line attached to the strut. That way it can move freely and stuff as you turn the wheel and it doesn't get into anything. So stick a screwdriver or a little pry bar in there. Once you pop that clip out, slide the brake line back and pull it out. Don't forget to put this clip back in when you put it back together. Otherwise, this brake line will end up getting into your tire, and when you go to hit your brakes, you have no brakes. Now we're going to take the lower mount bolts here off. See, you got a 19 millimeter nut on one side, and I think that was a 17 millimeter bolt on the other. In a lot of cases, the bolt doesn't spin on you when you go take the nut off, but sometimes it will, so you may or may not have to hold it. So we'll go ahead and zip those off. Now we got one that's spinning. Now sometimes when you do this, you can slide the bolt right out. Sometimes it doesn't want to come on out. So what we will do, see, this other one will break loose and come on out. Which, as you can see, it doesn't. So the next best thing, take your nut, thread it back on a couple threads. Of course, it's the lower one that's going to fight, which is the hardest one to get to. Take you a hammer or even an air hammer and tap it out. Let's see. The reason you put the nut back on it is so you don't destroy the threads hitting it with a hammer. Now that we've got it worked out a little bit, I'm going to grab a socket. Alright, another thing that you can do is you can actually stick a wrench in between the bolt and the strut mount. Put a socket on the bolt, start spinning the bolt while pulling on the wrench, and you can slowly work that out. Voila! Alright, now that we've got the strut loose and everything done, the next step will be to go up top, loosen the nuts, and take the nuts off on the strut mount. So let's get her lowered. Alright, on the top here, you actually have three bolts that you have to loosen for the strut mount. You can loosen these and take this bar out of your way, or you don't want to mess with the bar, then you just loosen a nut here, a nut kind of behind that bar, and then there is a third nut all the way in the very back right there, which can be a pain to get to, but if you have a ratcheting wrench, it's not that bad. So me personally, I like to do the harder one first, so I'm going to go ahead and get that one out. There's one. Now that I'm going to have my ratchet stuck on there, let's get the front one. Keep in mind, don't take all the nuts all the way off at this point. You can take two of them off, leave one of them on. And I'll show you why here in just a second. Okay, now you're down to one nut that's finger tight. So what you want to do, you want to reach through the wheel well, grab a hold of the spring with one hand, and then finish removing this nut with your other hand. Once you get that nut out of the way, you're ready to pull the strut out. There we have the old strut. Now when replacing it with the new strut, a couple things you want to pay attention to. Look at the spacing between the studs. A lot of times they're different, so it has to go in one particular way. This one actually looks like it's about even. Slip her up in there. Once you get the studs lined up, get you a nut started back on. Now, to keep you from having to work a wrench so much, reach down in there, lift the strut up, run the nuts down by hand. That way all you really have to use the tool for is the final tightening. Keep in mind, when you're doing these, do not use an impact on these top studs. If if you do, in most cases they end up breaking off. And then you end up getting to the dangerous part of replacing struts, which is compressing that coil spring. Alright, let's get them tightened up. Alright, now that we got that part done, we're ready to move on to the lower part. But little FYI, if you want to, you can pull the wipers off, pull your cowl panel off, and pull this assembly out and make it a whole lot easier access. But as you can see, it didn't take me very long with all that stuff in there. So I just went ahead and left it in because it would have taken me longer to get all that out, put it back in, than what it does for me fighting around it. Now, another thing when you are doing struts is absolutely never touch the center nut on the strut. You never want to loosen that without the spring being in some kind of a clamp vise or something like that, pulling the tension off of it so you can wiggle the spring on the strut. If you try to pull that out, the strut's going to go shooting off on you. Somebody can get seriously hurt. So never ever pull that center nut. Now, another thing to keep in mind when you're doing struts, in this particular instance we don't have to worry about this, but on some vehicles, you look at the head of the bolt, you see perfectly round, basically like a washer built onto it directly under the head. As long as you have that and not an oblong or egg-shaped type of part on the bottom, that's called a cam bolt. You use that to adjust the alignment in the front end of it. So if you have a cam bolt on it, as soon as you're done, you absolutely need to go get an alignment. In this case, it's questionable, however, we're still going to send this one for alignment. Now, another thing is on these bolt holes here on your spindle, if they're both perfectly round, without the cam bolt, you're good. If one of them happens to be elongated so that there's room where you can wiggle the bolt side to side in there, once again, that's a way to adjust alignment. So you will absolutely have to have an alignment once you are done. For now, let's get this back together. First thing we need to do is get this strut relatively straight and press the spindle back up in it. Usually, replacement struts don't spin this freely, so that's going to make this one fight just a little bit more. Now, it didn't want to go in at first. Usually what that is the axle's trying to separate a little bit. If that happens to you, take and spin the rotor here. That will re-engage the axle and you can go ahead and get it up in there. Alright, now we got the bolt in there. A lot of times you wiggle jiggle, you can get the bolt fed on through. Sometimes you have to use a hammer and knock it in. Get your nuts back on it. Get them tightened down. Now, same thing on assembly as disassembly. Sometimes you can run the nuts on in without having to hold the other side of the bolts. Sometimes you will have to hold them. Now, keep in mind, if you don't have an impact to be able to run those nuts in, you really need to crank on these nuts. Make sure that they are good and tight before you get the vehicle back down and on the road. So now we are going to go ahead and get the brake line reinstalled. Sometimes this can be kind of tricky. So if you look, it's got kind of a flat spot on two sides, rounded on the others. You have to get them lined up inside of that. So it may take a little bit of playing to get these lined up correctly. Slide your clip in, make sure it's engaging in that little groove in there. Tap her into place. Brake line's installed. We're going to reinstall the ABS line. Now that we got that installed, we need to reinstall the sway bar link. This side, the strut's done. Keep in mind that when you're doing the passenger side, it's pretty much the exact same thing. The only thing you need to worry about is when you go to put your strut up in here, make sure that the mounting boss for the sway bar link is on the same side as your original strut. Because usually what you'll find is on this side you see it's here, but yet if you put the passenger side strut in here, it would be here. So just double check that, make sure you're putting the correct side on so you don't end up having to do it twice. Okay, now we've got the fronts done. We're going to go ahead and move on to the back. You'll see, especially on this one, the back is extremely similar to the front. The only real difference is we don't have a brake line clipped into the strut on this one. It actually runs up and clips onto the body. So other than that, really, it is almost identical to doing the fronts. Well, let's get started. There's sway bar link. Let's get the ABS wire, which, depending on the options on your vehicle, you may or may not even have to worry about undoing an ABS wire. Now we need to get the strut mount bolts off of it. Now, just wiggle, jiggle the two apart. Sway bar link out of the way. Alright, now we move to the top and get the mount bolts. Now on this one, the mount bolts are in the back, but you'd have to reach all the way around to be able to do anything. So your best form of action is to actually get an assistant to help you. Alright, now on the rear, right here is your strut tower. You got a plastic panel that covers it. You can grab that plastic panel, lift it up, and there's your 3 nuts for the strut mount. Well, we just need to get somebody to hold the strut, and then I'll take these 3 nuts off, and the strut will fall right out of it. Alright, you got it? Alright, here we go. And you're done. Now here's a good example of what I was explaining a few minutes ago on the front to make sure you get the right one in the right place. If you look down here, here's the boss for the sway bar link mount. On the old one, this would be the new one. But if you accidentally picked up the wrong one, you notice that the boss is on the wrong side. So you take a good look at that, make sure that you do get the right strut so you don't have to do it twice. Alright, I got them started. Alrighty, now that we got the new strut mounted up in there, it's time to go to underneath it and get the lower part done. Alright, let's get these mount bolts back in it. And let's see if we can get this one wrapped up. This one's not going to go so easily. Alright, not much room to swing a hammer. So you can see sometimes they can be a bit of a pain. You just have to be more of a pain. And I'm good at that. Alright, now this whole assembly is trying to push out away from the vehicle, which is getting the knuckle to come out. So we have to try to get that forced in, which isn't going to be very easy. It can be a whole lot of fun to do. So just a little patience here. Like I said, you got to be the bigger pain. Alright, now get the ABS line, run back on it. And finally, the sway bar link. There we go, and now we've got the rear strut installed also. Alright, so now all the struts and stuff are done. Need to take it out for a test drive, send it off to have the alignment done, and send her on its merry way with the customer. So, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you very much. Join us for the next show. That would be a big fat no. Oh, it's just out of reach. Helps if you grab the right wrench. Hey, look at that! That one's just gonna be difficult all the way around. My buddy John's gonna hold it for me. Oh, I had it. No, I didn't. Don't hit your finger. We're gonna make a little noise. Too many things in my hand. One of these days I'll learn how to tie.